snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys! So I am here today to do a book review, and the book that I'm going to be reviewing is book number 6 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series by Steven Erikson. This is the longest book I've ever read. It's the longest book I've ever read. It's over 1,200 pages, guys. It is huge. Huge. Ridiculously long. But I'm so happy that I finished it, and I'm so happy that I enjoyed it as well, because God, it would be awful if I hadn't have. But yeah, I enjoyed it. So I will admit, of course, that I was a little bit intimidated by this, knowing that it was the longest book I was ever going to read to this date. Of course, I will be reading longer in the future, because the 7th one, which is the next one, is longer than this one. Even though I was a little bit intimidated, I was very intrigued about what was going to happen. This book in particular focuses on various different convergences of some of the other plot lines we've focused on in previous Malazan Book of the Fallen books. For example, in the 4th and 5th books we are focusing on different sections of the world, one of which in the 5th book is a completely different section of the world that isn't anything to do really with any of the other books, and so that section of the world that we've only been introduced to in the 5th book comes into this one, and we get to see it overlapping with the Malazan world, which has been the focus for most of the other books, the Genebakis sort of campaign and world. Remember the Edor that we met in the Midnight Tides? This book harks back to more trouble with them. This book still has some of the stuff that is unresolved with the bridge burners going on. We also get introduced more to the new master of the deck, and we see him becoming a pretty badass, awesome person. And then the terrible struggles that we see all of our characters face in all of the previous books, yep, that's still in here as well. And all of the gods who we've seen that like to meddle in everything, oh yep, they are still in this book too. So it packs a lot into this book, which is why it's so long. Basically, there are a ton of different plot lines that we have seen evolving and developing in the last few books, and we've seen them start to converge in this one. Everything that we have been hinted at, everything that we are beginning to see emerging, and all these new powers and things we're beginning to see emerge are starting to come together, and we're starting to understand who they are, and what they're trying to do. And the fact that everything was starting to come together marks for me the fact that this is the 6th book. We're past the halfway point now. Everything that we've been hinting at is going to start converging and coming together and building up to a big epic conclusion, presumably. As for the enjoyment levels I had whilst reading this book, I would say it's a difficult one, because when I was into the book I was really enjoying it, but it did take me a lot longer to get into because I was reading a lot of other stuff at the same time. I started reading this in TBR Takedown, I then finished it up in Booktubeathon, and it wasn't a good read-along book. It really wasn't, because it's very dense, it's very chunky, and although I do enjoy it and I think that there are some great moments of comedy and fun within it, it's too dense for a read-along, so I shouldn't have really had it on my list. But I'm glad I finished it in Booktubeathon, because otherwise it would have probably continued dragging on. It's not a good read-along book. However, with that said, I think my mindset was just all over the place because I was reading so much and so many different things during Booktubeathon and TBR Takedown, and so I didn't dedicate quite as much as I wanted to some of this and sort of really understanding some of it. So I did go back and reread a section of it at one point as well to sort of refresh myself and things like that. The sections of this book I really loved. For example, the section within Yigatan, I really enjoyed that. I thought that was so interesting. It was very dark, it was very spooky, it was very scary, and we had a lot of characters who were hallucinating and things like that, and it was all very dark and very creepy, so I enjoyed that a lot. It didn't drag necessarily, but there were some moments that I felt could have been cut out maybe, and it wouldn't really have affected the overall plot. But who knows with Erikson, because he does so much foreshadowing, that all of that stuff could come into play in the later books too, so I really don't know. It just felt very long to me at times. This book definitely had some really dark and miserable and sad moments for our characters. I felt really emotionally attached to some of them, and I felt heartbroken and sorrow for them, because they just went through so much crap. Like, they just were rolling in crap, essentially, at times. It was really well written. I really enjoyed seeing the writing style during those passages that were so dark and sombre. Some of the characters who were included in this book that I really enjoyed, not all of them, but some of them, because otherwise I'd be going for ages, include the Master of the Deck, who I won't say who it is, but he is a badass. He's definitely changed from when we first met him. He has become a new person. He has started to really realise his potential and realise the power that he has, which is extraordinarily immense. He has an immense amount of power, and he does some very cool things, such as summoning undead warriors and all this sort of craziness. So I really enjoyed seeing him, and seeing him really blossom into this vengeful, spiteful character who had his way of getting his own back now, and he was going to use it. Karsa was another character whom I love. I thought he was great in his introductory book, and I really enjoyed him in this book. I thought he was fabulously done. I thought he just as a character was complex and fun and interesting. He learns a lot, and his character has progressed a seriously long way from when we first come across him and meet him and his tribe, so I think he's an excellent one. I loved having Ikariam and Mappo back. I thought that their storyline was one of the most sad, one of the most devastating ones. I had some moments where I was really feeling for them. Ikariam is a badass, like he's really scary at times, but he was tricked and manipulated so much in this book that I felt so sorry for him. Even though he's scary and intimidating and he's very ruthless, I still felt for him, which I think is great that Steven Erikson can show you how scary this guy is but also make you feel for him. Seeing Trell come back into the story was fabulous as well, because obviously after having read the 5th book we now know a lot more about him and his homeland and what he is and how he's connected to everything and how he's been separated from the other Edur and things like that. So I loved seeing him and his homeland in book 5, and seeing him in book 6 I understood a lot more about him. I really had a good impression of who he was, and the actions that he took in this book did interest me a lot, so I enjoyed that. Iskarul, Pust and his wife made me laugh so much in this book. They are definitely comedic relief, and even though Iskarul Pust is quite a major character and he has a lot of important stuff to say, he does it in such a bizarre and funny way that you're never really sure what to take as truth and what to take as his just general crazy persona. He's really interesting as a character and he's very entertaining, so I loved reading about him and his wife, and when they were bickering it just made me laugh so much, so that was fab. Cutter and his crew were very interesting because they were given a big long expedition that they had to go on, and I liked seeing that, and I think that they'll come back into it in a big way as well sometime soon. Teblor was a character whom I really didn't like to begin with. I thought she was really horrible, and then in this book we get to see more about her and her personality and her reasoning behind everything she's done, and I thought my perspective on her sort of shifted a bit, and I started to like her a lot more, and I started to kind of understand her more, and she felt more human and more real to me, and I like that. I like the fact that my perspective from one book to the next could be changed so much on a character. Apsalar is a character who's certainly come a really long way since we first met her. She was quite a timid young child when we first met her, and now she is a badass. Like many of the characters in there, she is really a badass. She goes and she does some crazy things, and she just ends up in some strange, creepy situations. She meets these two characters called Telorast and Curdle, who are these ghost-like creatures, and she just is followed by them, and they're really funny. I love them. They were funny, so I like that as well. And Apsalar seems to be working with the gods whether she wants to or not, so I really liked her role in everything and the part that she had to play out. I thought that was very intriguing, because I'm sure it will lead to more and more stuff. And of course finally we had Kruppe. Kruppe made a little appearance. He didn't make a big one. I wish he'd been in it more. That would be my real complaint with this book, was that Kruppe is my favourite character and he needs to be in it more, but he's not, so I'm sure he'll come back in later books, but I really enjoyed the little snippet that we did get of him. There are so many more characters I could mention, but I would be here for hours and hours because there's just hundreds of them in this series. But those are some of my favourite ones and some of the ones who had the biggest impact on some of the things that happened within this book. In terms of the writing style, Steven Erikson once again brings out these really thought-provoking, very wonderful lines and imagery. He's very good at creating these devastating scenes, and he's also very fabulous at just making you think and making you put yourself into the position of these really hard done by characters. I love the fact that he can invoke such sorrow and darkness and sadness within me, but equally he has these great moments of humour and fun and excitement and joy within the series, which just, they show you that there's something for these characters to live for, and there is some fun in the world, but honestly a lot of the world is horribly depressing. I will say, after having read Knight of Knives by Ian Esselmont last month, it was good to come back to this one. It was a big improvement on Esselmont's writing style. Esselmont felt so rushed, he didn't feel developed at all, he didn't feel like he really understood what he was trying to say and how he was trying to get people to connect with the story. Erikson knows his stuff. He knows how to draw you in, he knows how to captivate you, and he knows how to interest you in what is going on, and he does that excellently, which I think Esselmont might end up doing that in his later books, but definitely in the first one he wrote, he really didn't. He didn't captivate me at all. Glad to be back to Erikson again. On the whole, I had a few ups and downs with this, which means I can only give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars instead of a 5. I think a lot of it was to do with the fact that I had read it in a read-along, which maybe wasn't the best idea. Otherwise it could easily have been a 5 stars, because there were some eventful things that happened that really I feel will be a massive influence to the way that the plot develops and the story unfolds. So I'm sure so many things within this will influence the way that it all unfolds. And I'm really looking forward to moving on to the next one, although it is massive, it's huge. As you can see, it's chunky, it's very chunky. This one looks bigger because I've broken the spine reading it, but this one is bigger. This one's like 80 pages longer than this one, so looking forward to moving on to it. But it's going to be a big one, it's going to be a big ride and a big journey. I'm ready to undertake it though. I'm hoping I'm going to enjoy it just as much as I did this one, if not more. And I would love to hear your thoughts. If you guys have read this book, what did you think about this one in particular? What do you think about the series as a whole? How do you think that Erikson compares to Iskarul? I think Erikson is a lot better at the moment. I'm waiting to see if Iskarul improves. He might do. I would love to hear all of your thoughts, so thank you guys all for watching. Leave me all your comments, and I will see you all again soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little